I held my boy's flag like it was the last piece of him I had left. Folded, triangular, pressed against my chest so tight it hurt. But it wasn't the flag that broke me, it was the silence. The kind of silence that happens only in a military cemetery when 20 rifles have just fired into the sky and all the mothers nearby are praying it won't be them next time, except this time, it was me and my son, Private First Class Elijah Carter. He was lying in a closed casket under a gray Virginia sky after a roadside bomb ripped through his convoy 6,000 miles from home. I stood in full dress uniform, not for ceremony, but because I earned it. 32 years in the U.S. Army, Combat Tours Logistics Command, and the last black woman in my graduating class from West Point, 1993. But to the cop standing across the burial ground from me, none of that mattered. His name was Officer Brent Callahan. I remember it because his badge number was etched into my vision like a scar, number 74103. He wasn't part of the military guard. He wasn't even on duty at the cemetery. He was just there, off-duty, in uniform, with a sneer and a sense of superiority that stuck out like a thorn in my throat. Maybe he didn't like the way I stood. Maybe it was the stars on my shoulder. Or maybe it was the color of my skin. He started toward me just after the flag-folding ceremony ended. No words, just a quick walk, one hand on his belt, the other resting near his holster. I didn't flinch. Not then. "Ma'am," he barked, "you can't be up there. Step back from the casket." I turned, slowly, kept my hands visible. "I'm General Carter," I said. "This is my son." His eyes narrowed. "That's a federal uniform. Where'd you get it?" I blinked, thought I misheard. "I earned it. I served this country long before you finished high school." "You're impersonating an officer," he said. Louder this time. People started looking. The honor guard froze. The army chaplain raised a hand but didn't step in. Then it happened fast. Callahan lunged forward, pushed me back a step. My heel caught the corner of the platform. I stumbled but didn't fall. The flag dropped from my hands, and before I could reach for it, he drew his gun, pointed it at my head, right there, in front of my son's casket, in front of 20 soldiers, and my daughter, and God. "Down. Now," he shouted. "You're not who you say you are." Someone screamed, a camera phone clicked, then another. Somewhere in the back, someone said, "Yo, he's got a gun on a general." But Callahan didn't hear, or didn't care. All he saw was a black woman in uniform, a symbol he couldn't process. And I saw my son's face. The boy I raised alone while serving 3 tours. The boy who never once disrespected a flag, a woman, or a stranger. The boy who died for a country that just aimed a pistol at his mother's skull. So I did the only thing I could. I stood tall, back straight, heart steady, and I said loud enough for everyone to hear, "You want to shoot me? Then make sure you aim high. Because I've stood on battlefields where men like you wouldn't last an hour." Behind me, one of the soldiers stepped forward. "You're out of line, officer. That's Major General Olivia Carter." The silence cracked. People gasped. Cameras flashed again, this time for history. They say grief comes in waves. But mine came in uniform. Pressed, decorated, immaculate. But heavy, like armor built from memory. After the incident at the cemetery, I refused medical attention. I didn't want a gurney, I wanted my son. But the world doesn't pause for mourning, not even for generals. 2 hours later, I sat in a small interview room at the Arlington security office. There was still gunpowder on my jacket collar. The officer in front of me, a young woman named Lejana Rodriguez, had tears in her eyes. "General Carter," she said, careful with every word, "do you need to call someone?" I shook my head. "They already called me," I said softly. "They told me my son wasn't coming home." Rodriguez looked down, ashamed, not for herself, but for the badge she wore. I looked at my hands, calloused palms, veins raised like rivers, hands that carried rifles, hands that wrote condolence letters, hands that tucked Elijah into bed at age 6, then held his dog tags at 21. My whole career, I fought to make those hands mean something. But to Officer Callahan, they were just hands of a black woman standing in the wrong place. Elijah James Carter was born during a thunderstorm in North Carolina. I remember the way the nurse whispered, "He's got your eyes." I was 24, a second lieutenant, and scared to death. His father wasn't there. He never would be. But I didn't beg. I didn't break. I did what soldiers do. I adapted. I overcame. I raised Elijah between deployments, carrying photo albums in my rucksack. Each year I missed a birthday, I mailed him a new dog tag, engraved with a lesson. Integrity is doing right when no one's watching. Never salute a lie. You're my greatest mission. He wore them all, layered, like armor for the soul. He could have gone to college, could have stayed home. But no. Elijah chose the core. He told me the night he enlisted, "I want to stand where you stood, Mom, but I want to come home with my head high and my hands clean." He did. Until that IED blew through his convoy in Kandahar. They said he died instantly. No pain, no fear, just a flash. But how would they know? At his funeral, I didn't just lose a son. I lost the one person in this world who saw both sides of me. The woman who wore medals, and the mother who burned her fingers ironing his little church shirt every Sunday. Back in the interview room, Rodriguez offered me coffee. I declined. My stomach felt like concrete. She tapped her tablet. "Officer Callahan has been placed on administrative leave pending investigation," she said. Her voice was tight. "Ma'am, I want you to know, the footage, what he did, people saw it." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean, people?" She turned the screen toward me. It was already viral. The video, blurry, shaky, showed Callahan yelling, me standing still, the gun, the flag on the ground. But what caught the world wasn't the gun, it was my voice. That one line, "You want to shoot me? Then make sure you aim high." It was on TikTok, Twitter, CNN. Some were calling it the funeral standoff. Others, the day a general didn't blink. But I didn't feel brave. I felt tired. Because this wasn't the first time someone questioned my right to be here. Not the first time someone mistook my silence for submission. Not the first time someone saw the uniform and thought, too decorated for someone like her. Flashbacks hit me like bullets. Fort Leonard Wood, 1996. White male cadet grabs my arm in the mess hall. Says I'm playing soldier because I walk too proud for a maid. Baghdad, 2007. An Iraqi interpreter refuses to believe I'm the commanding officer. He waits for the real leader to enter. Pentagon parking lot, 2011. Security checks my badge 5 times. Then waves in the white colonel behind me without question. But I never broke. Because Elijah watched. Because every little black boy watching needed proof that we endure, that we belong, that we fight back, with honor, not hate. Rodriguez was still talking, but I stood up, gently placed Elijah's flag into my satchel. "I'll be at his grave tomorrow morning," I said. "Let them know if they need a statement, they'll have to meet me there." As I stepped outside, the breeze hit my face. It carried whispers, echoes, prayers. And I remembered something Elijah once wrote to me, right before his first deployment. He said, "Mom, I'm not afraid of dying. I'm afraid of not meaning anything if I do." I looked up. Clouds parted, and I whispered back, "You do. You always will." The cemetery looked different under morning light. There were no cameras now, no rifles firing in salute, just rows of headstones and the gentle rustle of leaves above the graves of men who died wearing the same flag folded in my satchel. I had come early, not for ceremony, but for confrontation. They'd announced a press statement to be held at Elijah's gravesite that morning. I didn't ask who authorized it. I didn't care. They wanted me silent. I would speak. They wanted me ashamed. I would stand. I wore the same uniform, the same medals. But this time, I pinned Elijah's dog tags over my heart, above the ribbons. He had worn them into war. Now, I would wear them into battle. Reporters started arriving just after 7 a.m. They fanned out along the cemetery paths like ants to sugar. Some whispered, others just stared, unsure if they should be asking questions or offering condolences. I kept my back straight. Then came the boom of a car door slamming. I turned, and there he was. Officer Brent Callahan, still in uniform, still walking like the world owed him clearance to every room. This time, though, there was no pistol at his hip, just a clipboard and a chip on his shoulder. He walked past the press line, didn't acknowledge me. "Is this some kind of circus?" he muttered. "She's not even the victim. I am. My reputation is being destroyed." A reporter called out, "Officer Callahan, do you deny pointing a firearm at Major General Carter?" He paused, looked right at the cameras. "I didn't know who she was," he said. "I was trying to ensure safety at a public event. Anyone could have impersonated a soldier. You've seen the scams." I stepped forward, louder than the wind, calmer than his panic. "You didn't see a threat," I said. "You saw a black woman standing where you didn't think she belonged." The crowd hushed, phones lifted, microphones extended. Callahan blinked, then smirked. Ma'am, with all due respect. Don't call me ma'am, I interrupted. You called me a liar, a criminal. You aimed a loaded weapon at my head while I held the flag of a son who died protecting your right to wear that uniform. Gasps fluttered through the crowd. Someone whispered, "She said it." I stepped closer. You didn't ask for ID. You didn't ask for rank. You barked commands and reached for your gun. He scoffed. I did what I was trained to do. No, I said, voice sharp. You did what you were conditioned to do. And your conditioning told you that women like me don't earn stars, we borrow them. One of the reporters, an older black woman in a navy blue blazer, stepped forward and asked, General Carter, did Officer Callahan ever apologize to you personally? I turned to face her. Let the silence build. No, I said clearly, but he's not the only one who owes an apology. At that moment, Sergeant Daniel Moore from the Honor Guard, young, white, nervous, stepped forward from the crowd. He raised his hand slightly, like a child about to confess something in church. I was there, he said, at the funeral. Callahan stiffened. Moore's voice shook. I saw it. She didn't provoke him, didn't raise her voice. The only reason he pulled that gun was he didn't believe she was who she said she was. And what makes you say that? A CNN reporter asked. Moore looked down. Because we've all heard him talk before, off record, about women in uniform, about quotas, about affirmative action. Callahan exploded. You little coward. Police officers in plain clothes rushed forward, placing hands on his shoulders. Let go of me, he barked. This is a setup. I'm the real officer here. She's the fraud. A ripple moved through the crowd. And then, from behind the press line, a woman stepped out. Civilian clothes, gold badge around her neck. Not anymore, she said. Brent Callahan, you are hereby suspended from duty pending full federal investigation into misconduct, excessive force, and racial bias under the Law Enforcement Integrity Act. Gasps. Again. This time louder. Callahan's jaw dropped. You can't do this. I just did, she replied. We've reviewed body cam footage, witness statements, and the chain of behavior going back 7 years. Callahan was escorted out, still yelling, still denying. But this time, no one listened. This time, the silence belonged to me. I stepped up to the podium someone had set up beside Elijah's grave. I didn't read from a script, didn't quote a Bible verse, didn't cite military code. I looked straight into every camera, into every young face, every mother, every veteran who had ever been told they didn't belong where they stood. And I spoke. I've buried soldiers. I've buried dreams. I've buried fear. But today, I bury something else. The lie that dignity must ask permission to exist. The wind caught the flag beside me. Elijah's name rippled on a placard behind the flowers. Reporters wiped their eyes. A few civilians clapped, tentatively, respectfully. But one teenage boy near the back whispered loud enough for his friend to hear, "She's a damn superhero." I smiled. Not because I felt powerful, but because I finally knew. The world had seen me. Not just the uniform, not just the pain, not just the color. As I stepped down from the podium, my boots pressed into the soft grass where my son lay and where truth had finally taken root. But even as the crowd began to disperse, I noticed a small group still lingering beyond the press line. 3 young cadets, dressed in plain clothes but standing at attention. One held a notebook. The other 2 had tears welled up behind determined eyes. They approached hesitantly. General Carter, the tallest one, said, "We're cadets from the ROTC program at Howard. We came here because we didn't want to just read about you in a news cycle. We wanted to see you for ourselves." I smiled gently. "And what did you see?" He hesitated. "A future we still believe in." Those 6 words hit harder than any applause. I gave him Elijah's favorite quote, the one he carved into his locker back in high school. Courage isn't loud. It's the moment you choose to stand when no one's clapping yet. The cadets saluted me, not out of protocol, but out of reverence. I returned the salute. Later that afternoon, I walked alone to a nearby section of the cemetery. Graves from World War II. Vietnam. Names almost faded by time. But I found one that always called me back. Colonel Matthew Rhodes, my first commanding officer, and the man who once told me, "Someday they'll salute you without hesitation. But it won't be because of the stars on your shoulder, it'll be because of the weight you carried getting there." I whispered into the wind, "Sir, I think I finally understand what you meant." As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed. It was a message from the Secretary of Defense's office. We would like to schedule a conversation regarding institutional reforms on base-level bias. Your input is essential. I let the message sit for a minute, then typed back, I'll be there. Bring a bigger table. We're not asking for seats anymore. That evening, news stations replayed the footage on loop, but what stayed with viewers, what went viral across platforms, wasn't Callahan's outburst. It was a still frame. Me standing tall, flag in one hand, dog tags in the other, staring down a broken system, not with rage, but with resolve. And underneath it, someone had captioned, "She didn't flinch, so now we won't either." United States v. Officer Brent Callahan, Day 1. Federal Courthouse, Washington, D.C. The courtroom buzzed with a low murmur like a church holding its breath. I sat in the front row, uniform pressed, ribbons aligned, my son's dog tags tucked neatly under my blouse. The weight of them reminded me, I wasn't here just as a mother. I was here as a soldier who survived her own battlefield. Brent Callahan entered the room with a smirk. He wore a suit instead of a uniform. But the arrogance didn't change. The prosecution opened with body cam footage. Muted gasps echoed as the screen lit up with the now infamous image. A white police officer pressing a loaded gun to the temple of a black woman in full military dress in front of her son's casket. Even the jury looked away. Some had tears in their eyes before a word was spoken. Callahan's defense lawyer, a sharp-tongued man in a $1,000 suit, stood confidently. What you saw was a mistake, not a crime, he told the jury. A moment of poor judgment, not malicious intent. Officer Callahan believed he was protecting the public from someone impersonating military authority. He turned to me, sitting still, calm. But mistaken identity is not a hate crime. The judge nodded. Call your first witness. They called me. I stood. The courtroom felt like 1,000 eyes breathing down my back. Raised my right hand, swore the oath, and took the stand. The prosecution began gently. My name, rank, service record, medals, deployments, years served. I watched the jurors' faces shift, recognition turning into reverence. Then came the question. General Carter, what was going through your mind when Officer Callahan pointed his weapon at you? I paused, then said slowly, I thought, my son gave his life for a country that still sees my skin before it sees my stars. Dead silence. Did you ever feel you were impersonating anyone? No, I said. I was impersonated for decades. People saw what they wanted, maid, assistant, outsider, but I earned every stripe I wear. I buried too many soldiers to be questioned on my right to grieve my own. The lawyer approached. He smiled, almost kindly. General Carter, is it possible that Officer Callahan didn't recognize you in the moment? Recognizing me wasn't the issue, I replied. Respecting me was. He tilted his head. But surely you understand that tensions were high. He was under pressure. How could he have known? I cut in, voice still steady. He could have known by doing what any good officer does, ask before aiming. The jury stirred. The judge didn't intervene. But the real shift came after lunch. A surprise witness was called. Sergeant Tamika Wells, an officer of color who worked with Callahan at the precinct for over 5 years. She walked in with her chin raised, her badge visible at her waist. The defense objected, but the judge allowed it. Tamika sat down, took a breath, and then said, I'm here because silence protects no one. She described overhearing Callahan say things like, too many black women pretending to be heroes. I don't trust a woman with a gun unless she's cooking bacon. She described disciplinary complaints filed and buried. She spoke about a culture, not just a man. The courtroom was still, except for the scribbling of pens. Why didn't you speak up earlier? The prosecution asked. Tamika looked at me, at the jury, then back at the empty seat where Callahan sat. Because I was afraid, she said. Afraid I'd lose my badge. Afraid no one would believe me. But when I saw that video, I saw myself in that casket too. A few jurors wept openly. The judge called for a recess. Later that day, the prosecution presented a timeline of complaints against Callahan, 8 in total over a decade, mostly from people of color. Only one was ever followed up. The pattern became a picture. And the picture became undeniable. In the hallway, a journalist caught up with me. General Carter, what do you hope comes out of this trial? I looked her square in the eye. That people stop asking what uniform we wear and start asking what kind of justice we protect. Back in court, closing arguments began. The defense leaned on fear. Officers have to make split-second decisions. They're human. The prosecution leaned on truth. This wasn't a mistake, it was a mirror. And this time the mirror didn't shatter, it reflected exactly what we needed to see. The jury left to deliberate. We waited. 1 hour, 2, 3. I sat in silence, fingers gripping Elijah's dog tags like a prayer. Finally, verdict guilty. On all counts. Callahan didn't flinch. He stared ahead, jaw tight. The judge's sentence came swiftly. Brent Callahan, for the crimes of aggravated assault, civil rights violation under color of law, and abuse of authority, this court sentences you to life in federal prison without the possibility of parole. Gasps, applause. Some held hands, others closed their eyes. I just stood. Not in triumph, but in clarity. Because justice isn't revenge. Justice is recognition. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had grown. People held signs. Honor has no color. We saw her. We believe her. One little girl stood on her father's shoulders, saluting as I passed, and I saluted back, not as a symbol, but as a survivor. 6 months later, the headlines had faded. The media cycle had moved on, to another protest, another face, another tragedy caught on shaky phone video. But for me, justice didn't end with a verdict. It began with the questions that came after. I still walked by Elijah's grave every Sunday morning. I still polished my boots the same way I taught him, circular, with care. Only now I wasn't just walking as a grieving mother. I was walking as a woman who had lived through the storm and still had something to say. After the trial, the Justice Department launched a nationwide review of use of force complaints involving women of color. 5 states revised their police training manuals to include scenarios involving high-ranking military personnel because of me. And Officer Brent Callahan, he appealed the conviction. He lost. He now spends his days behind bars at a federal penitentiary in Ohio. He writes letters, angry ones, blaming the system, blaming woke culture, blaming everything except the man in the mirror. I've never responded. Some silences are earned. But the letters I did answer came from everywhere. A boy from Baltimore wrote, "They tried to erase you, but you became permanent." A retired Marine sent me his Medal of Valor. No note, just the ribbon, like he was passing the torch. And then there was one envelope, scribbled in pencil, from a correctional facility. Inside was a single sentence, "I believe the lie, I won't anymore." It was signed, Sergeant Daniel Moore, the same young man who stood up for me when it mattered most. I kept that one. My days are quieter now, but not idle. I give talks, I write. I mentor cadets who think quiet strength is an outdated leadership trait until they hear what it sounds like in a courtroom. And once a month, I teach a course at the Olivia Carter Leadership Academy, a newly renamed ROTC extension in Georgia. Yes, they renamed the program after me. The woman someone once said didn't belong in the uniform. I didn't ask for that honor, but I show up for it. Because legacy doesn't come from what they give you, it comes from what you survive. In my final session this semester, a young woman raised her hand. Her voice trembled, but her eyes were fire. "General Carter," she asked, "do you ever wish it had happened to someone else?" The room went still. I let the silence settle, then said softly, "Every day, I wish no one had to carry what I carried. But if someone had to, I'm proud it was me, because I didn't flinch. And now, neither will you." The class stood, not in applause, in respect, and I stood with them, because that's the lesson no courtroom can teach. What they meant to break in you can become your weapon. I still visit Elijah, still talk to him. Sometimes I tell him what's happening in the world. Sometimes I just sit, but always before I leave, I say the same thing. "You didn't come home, son, but you brought this country a little closer to justice." Then I press my fingers to the cool stone and walk away, head high, back straight, mission still active. The story of Major General Olivia Carter is not just an indictment of racism and abuse of power in the justice system. It is a rare symbol of resilience, of a mother, a soldier, and a citizen. You can't read this story without feeling your heart tighten when the flag falls, or when a gun is drawn instead of an apology. But it was the moment she stood tall, eyes unshaken under the barrel of a gun, that became an immortal symbol of courage. A courage not born from authority, but from memory, loss, and truth. Her words, "You want to shoot me? Then make sure you aim high," weren't just for Callahan. They were for an entire society too used to degrading dignity without ever seeing people through a lens of fairness and respect. No one should have to prove their worth because of their skin color or gender. Truth doesn't need to shout. It stands firm when you don't bow. Sometimes, the deepest wounds become the fiercest fuel to change an entire system. To anyone who has ever been underestimated, misnamed, or denied a chance because of prejudice, this story is your reminder that you are not alone. And if you have the courage not to bow, you might be the one who opens the door for another generation to step into the light. This isn't just a tragedy. It's a wake-up call. And in a world desperate for justice, silence is no longer an option. As the general herself said, what they meant to break in you can become your weapon.